She stood beneath the ivy-covered arch, ready to marry the man she thought she knew until he humiliated her in front of everyone. And then her godmother, a retired Air Force colonel, stepped forward from the crowd. What happened next brought the entire ceremony to a standstill. You ever witness a moment flip from perfect to painful in a single breath? This was one of those. It was a Saturday in early June just outside Boulder, Colorado. The breeze was crisp, the sky cloudless, the kind of day people dream about for mountaintop weddings. Sunlight streamed through tall aspen trees and drifted over rows of white folding chairs. Everything about that cliffside venue whispered understated luxury artisan flower arrangements, a soft string quartet echoing in the background, and a ceremony arch draped in eucalyptus and linen that probably cost more than a decent used car. Marissa Langley, 36, stood at the altar. And she was radiant not just the way brides are expected to be, but in a way that made conversations pause when she entered. Her presence was magnetic. No theatrics, no pretense, just elegance anchored in calm, quiet strength. Her ivory dress was classic with modern touches, the neckline detailed with delicate embroidery that caught the sunlight. Her hair was coiled into a low, polished bun, revealing a tiny crescent moon tattoo behind her right ear. It was barely noticeable unless you knew her well. Her bridesmaids, 5 in total, stood behind her in deep, rust-colored dresses that made the mountain greenery around them seem even more vivid. Her mother, in a forest green shawl and clutching a silk handkerchief, already had tears in her eyes. Relatives from Phoenix were live-streaming the event to older family members who couldn't make the trip. Her college roommate, Jana, leaned toward the woman next to her and whispered, "Marissa looks like royalty." Everyone was there. Everyone except one person. Colonel Angela Voss, Marissa's godmother and lifelong mentor, hadn't arrived. She was stationed in Okinawa, and word was she couldn't get leave. Some guessed it was health-related, others assumed it was red tape. Whatever the reason, her absence lingered like a missing note in a song. Marissa never spoke about it, but it was clear she missed her. Then there was the groom, Thomas Riley, 39. Clean-cut, well-groomed, and dressed in a tailored navy suit that fit like it was sculpted for him. His family came from old Denver money law firms, golf clubs, and generational wealth. His relatives arrived with practiced smiles, sipping mint-infused water and making quiet comments about the blend of people in attendance. Not hostile, just distant. Thomas had the charisma of a man who'd nailed every job interview he ever walked into. The kind of guy who charmed strangers but left you wondering if you really knew him. Still, Marissa believed she did. They'd met at a leadership summit in Chicago 4 years earlier. He'd lingered after the final session to help clean up cracking clever jokes and casually asking for her number. She'd said no, then maybe then yes. Over time, his persistence wore down her caution. He often told her she was a wildfire wrapped in strategy, and she'd fallen for that balance, his ambition her grounded fire. Now, here they stood, surrounded by friends, family, and filtered light. The string quartet faded out. The officiant gave a soft nod. Guests shifted expectantly. Phones raised. It was time. But Thomas raised a hand. "Before we begin," he said, voice smooth as ever, taking the microphone from the officiant, "I'd like to say something." There were polite smiles, a few chuckles. Marissa tilted her head, confused but still composed. This wasn't part of the plan. The officiant hesitated. Her father sat up straighter. Thomas cleared his throat. "I didn't plan to say this," he began, "but I figured now is the right time to speak from the heart." The crowd leaned in. One of his groomsmen smirked. Someone pressed record. Then everything changed. A champagne flute clinked. "Marrying Marissa is the boldest decision I've ever made." Thomas began chuckling. That's when the energy shifted. You couldn't explain it yet, but you could feel it. Something subtle but off. But Thomas wasn't finished, far from it, and what followed flipped the entire mountaintop ceremony on its head. At first, people assumed he was just nervous. Public speaking could be daunting, especially with the mountains echoing every word and 100 people watching. But then he kept going. "I mean, let's be real," Thomas said, gripping the mic tighter. "Marissa is intense." There were scattered chuckles, mostly from his side of the aisle. His best man gave a low snort and leaned back with a smirk. Marissa stood motionless, smile frozen. Her hand, which had been resting gently on her bouquet, drifted to her side. "She's the kind of woman who'll call you out if you misquote a statistic, fact-check you during a Netflix documentary, and don't even think about explaining something she already knows unless you like being corrected in public." A few strained laughs. She once interrupted a dinner date to point out I used fewer instead of less. Like mid-sentence. Some polite chuckles, but now guests were exchanging confused glances. This wasn't a toast. It was a roast. And don't get me wrong, he continued adjusting his collar. I admire that. Her passion, her fire. But it's not exactly easy. Introducing her to my family, let's just say my mom needed a minute to adjust to the whole vibe. Someone from his side of the aisle laughed a bit too loud. Marissa's mother, sitting front row, narrowed her eyes. Her sister crossed her arms. The air thinned. She's not the smile and nod type. She doesn't bake pies, doesn't laugh at every dad joke. No performative sweetness. Silence. Thomas laughed nervously, clearly expecting more support. A couple of guests gave awkward claps. Someone coughed. I'm just saying, he went on digging deeper. She's different. Unfiltered. Direct. And look, I'm here for it. I'm still standing here, right? He turned to Marissa with a crooked smile, trying to charm his way out. She didn't smile back. Her eyes were glossy now, darting across the crowd as if searching for a lifeline. Her friends had stopped recording. Her college roommate looked down at the ground. Her father's jaw was set, his posture rigid. Thomas shifted the mic. "Babe," he said, "you okay?" She stared at him, said nothing. Then from the back, a hush. Heads began to turn. A woman had entered from the path leading to the ceremony. She moved with stillness and purpose, like time obeyed her differently. Marissa saw her first. Their eyes locked, and for the first time since the speech began, her expression changed. Not with relief. Something deeper. Recognition. Shock. It was Evelyn Ward. Colonel Evelyn Ward. Full uniform. Full presence. A career Air Force officer in full-dress blues, chest lined with ribbons and pins. Nearly 6 feet tall, no makeup, no jewelry. Just presence, precision, poise. Every strand of her silver-streaked hair was pinned perfectly in place, her face unreadable, her gait calm. The whispers began like wind through trees. Is that her godmother? She flew in from Japan. Thomas hadn't turned yet. He gave an uneasy laugh. What he said to the murmuring crowd, I thought being honest was good for a marriage. Still no response from Marissa. She wasn't looking at him anymore. Now everyone was watching the colonel. Evelyn didn't rush, didn't flinch, didn't blink. She walked steadily up the aisle, boots quiet on the stone path, until she stood just behind the groom. That's when Thomas finally noticed. He turned mid-joke and froze. She was 10 feet away, silent, standing tall, eyes locked on him like she'd been watching everything. "Colonel Ward," he stammered. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. She was already speaking volumes. Without a single word, the entire garden felt like it snapped to attention. Colonel Evelyn Ward didn't flinch. She stood motionless, arms locked behind her back in that rigid, formal military stance. Her presence said more than any of the jokes Thomas had tossed around with that microphone. The air turned thick, not dramatic, not staged, just still. Like everyone present understood deep in their bones, they were witnessing something they wouldn't forget. Marissa took one step forward, but her lips didn't move. She didn't need to speak. It was all there in her eyes, the weight of childhood letters sent from abroad, birthday video calls missed because of deployments, every emotion tied to the woman who'd stood in as a second mother when her own had passed. Evelyn had been gone but never absent, and now she was here. Thomas cleared his throat and gave a forced chuckle. "Wow, Colonel Ward. Didn't know you were flying in." "Surprise," he said, trying to sound casual, but the tremble in his voice betrayed him. He gripped the mic again like a lifeline. Evelyn's eyes didn't blink. She took 3 slow, measured steps forward, stopping just a few feet from him. Up close, you could see the fine creases on her face, not from age but from resilience, from standing in desert heat making impossible calls, burying comrades. She'd survived more in war zones than Thomas ever would in boardrooms. "You always did fill silence with your voice," she said. Calm, firm. Her tone didn't need to rise, it already filled the space. There was a ripple of laughter, not mocking, just true. Thomas blinked hard. "I think you might be misinterpreting. I heard you loud and clear," she cut in. "So did everyone here." The crowd went quiet. Evelyn turned to face them, her voice carried like a drumbeat in the hush. "I don't care if you came from Aspen or Atlanta wearing Italian leather or Sunday best. If you're sitting here watching a man humiliate a woman he's supposed to cherish in front of her family on the day they were meant to be united, you're not guests. You're witnesses." Marissa's breath hitched. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. Not anymore. She wasn't alone. Evelyn turned back to Thomas. "Let me explain something to you, son." Her words were sharper than any slap. "Marissa Ayers is not your punchline. She's not your character-building relationship to retell over drinks. She's not here to make you look bold or edgy." Thomas opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Evelyn stepped in closer. "This woman comes from a long line of fighters. Women who worked the night shift and still packed lunches before school. Women who buried their brothers' husbands' sons and still showed up to vote, to lead, to build. Women who didn't have to scream to be heard." A few guests nodded. One clapped, then another. Soon the whole right side of the garden was on its feet. You think it's brave to wing your vows. You think honesty is making fun of someone you claim to love. Evelyn's voice didn't rise, but it cut through the crowd like a blade. Brave is Marissa showing up in a world that keeps asking her to shrink and refusing every single day. The applause swelled. Marissa looked down, blinking fast. Her mother had tears streaming down her cheeks. Her sister whispered a shaky, "Yes, Mom," to no one in particular. Evelyn's tone softened. She doesn't need saving, she needs respect. Thomas stood there, sweating now, swallowing, trying to find his footing in front of a crowd that no longer looked at him the same. "Look, I was just being real," he stammered. "I joke when I'm nervous. I didn't mean anything by it." Evelyn arched one brow, the kind of look only a woman with rank could deliver. "If disrespect is your reflex when you're under pressure, then maybe marriage isn't the mission for you." She paused, let that land. Marissa breathed in slowly, her chest rising. Every moment of doubt, she'd ignored the condescending comments, the controlling jokes, the subtle digs came rushing forward. But this time she didn't swallow it. Evelyn turned her gaze to her, offering just a small knowing nod. No theatrics, just quiet strength like a hand on her back without ever touching her. Thomas looked from Evelyn to Marissa, then to the stunned guests. For once he was speechless, but this wasn't the end, because the next voice wasn't Evelyn's. It was Marissa's, and no one, not even Thomas, was ready for what she was about to say. She locked eyes with him. Not a blink, not a twitch. Just resolve. She was finally seeing him, truly seeing him for the first time. Elena stepped forward slowly, her posture calm, composed. There was no theatrics, no drama. Just a steady grace. Her bouquet now hung loosely at her side petals, skimming the fabric of her pale rose dress. She didn't need notes. She didn't need a mic. 3 years, she said, voice clear, steady. 3 years and you still don't know the difference between teasing and tearing someone down? Nathan's face froze. He tried to offer a smile, awkward, twitchy, desperate for some kind of redemption. "Babe, I don't babe me," she said, cutting him off sharply. Not after that. The guests were still suspended in silence. One of Elena's college friends quietly covered her mouth with both hands. Her aunt whispered, "Sweet Jesus," under her breath. Elena scanned the crowd, slowly meeting eyes, as if weighing the moment on every face. This was supposed to be about us, about love, about building something real. But you used your moment, this moment, to turn me into a punchline, into a character in your little routine. Nathan's gaze darted toward his family. His father's jaw was tight. His mother stared down at her lap, arms folded stiffly. Even his best man refused to meet his eyes staring at the grass. "I fought for this," Elena said, her voice never wavering. "I made room for your growing pains. I explained your awkwardness. I softened your missteps to my family, to my friends. I defended you when people said you weren't ready. I told myself you just needed time." She looked back at him. Her eyes shimmered now, but it wasn't fragility, it was clarity. "I carried this relationship. And the one moment where I was supposed to be honored, where I was supposed to feel seen, you made me feel small." Nathan tried again, scrambling for something to hold on to. It wasn't meant like that, Elena. I swear. I just got nervous. Nerves don't create who you are," she said. "They reveal who you already are." A low murmur moved through the guests. Heads turned, some nodded, others just watched in stunned silence as the truth unfolded in real time. Colonel Evelyn Ward remained still just off to the side, arms behind her back, saying nothing. She didn't need to. Elena had command of her own story now. "I spent so much time hoping you'd grow into the kind of man who could walk beside me," Elena said. "But now I see you weren't trying to grow. You were just hoping it'd shrink." The silence was absolute. She turned to the guests once more. "This isn't a breakup speech," she said. "This is clarity. This is a woman choosing not to step into a future she didn't build." She paused, then looked down at her hand. On her finger, the engagement ring, a clean, minimal diamond in a setting she had chosen, glinted in the sunlight. Without hesitation, Elena slid it off. She held it up briefly, not as a dramatic gesture, but as closure. Then she handed it back to Nathan, who still held the mic, but had no more words. She turned away from him toward the women who had stood behind her all along. Her cousin quietly stepped forward and took the bouquet from her hand. Her roommate nodded once, firm and proud. A guest in the third row began to clap, soft at first, then steadier as others joined, not a roar, but something stronger, something real. Nathan stood alone now, face flushed, the ring in his palm. Elena turned to Evelyn. "Thank you for being here," she said, her voice more grounded than it had been all day. "I needed you more than I realized." Evelyn gave her the barest smile. "You didn't need me to speak," she said. "You just needed to remember your own voice." Elena exhaled then, truly exhaled. And for the first time that day, she smiled. Not for appearances, not for the crowd, but because something deep inside her had shifted. But the moment wasn't quite over because now the crowd had to absorb what just happened, and not everyone would leave that garden the same. The ceremony technically wasn't over, but no one cared. The harpist had quietly packed her instrument. The officiant stood motionless at the side, wide-eyed and unsure whether to speak or disappear. Even the floral arch, once the picture of romance, now looked like a monument to something far more important. Elena stepped off the platform, no longer a bride, now just a woman reclaiming herself. Each step Ava took felt heavier, not with regret, but with release. Like she was walking out from under a weight she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. Her heels sank slightly into the damp lawn of the vineyard courtyard outside Santa Rosa, California. She didn't care. The hem of her ivory silk dress brushed through the grass already stained near the bottom. She didn't care about that either. The crowd parted for her like the sea opening for something holy and raw. Some guests looked away in quiet shame. Others just stared spellbound. She didn't walk toward anyone in particular until her mother stepped out from a row near the back and gently stopped her. Without a word, her mother opened her arms. Ava folded into them. Her forehead rested on her mother's shoulder like it had after hard school days when she was a kid and didn't have the words for what she was feeling. "You okay, baby?" her mother whispered into her hair. Ava nodded, eyes shut. "I am now." Her mother kissed her temple and gave a soft, proud squeeze. "Then walk proud. Let him see what he lost." And Ava did. She straightened, breathed deep, and kept walking, past rows of co-workers' high school friends. Even Zach's college roommate, who muttered something awkward to his date, still processing what had just unraveled in front of him. The kind of man who'd retell this story at parties later, but leave out the part where he stayed silent while his best friend dismantled a woman's dignity in public. Near the last row of folding chairs stood Evelyn, her godmother. Retired Air Force major. Arms finally relaxed at her sides, no longer at attention. Ava walked straight toward her. They didn't hug right away. They just stood close, holding each other's gaze. "You look strong in that uniform," Ava said quietly. Evelyn let out a short grunt. "It's hot as hell." Ava laughed. Really laughed. For the first time all day. "I didn't think you'd come." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Didn't think you'd make it. But something told me you don't miss your daughter's wedding. Not if there's any way to get there." Ava's throat tightened. Her vision blurred again. "It means everything she said." "No," Evelyn replied, tilting her head slightly. "It means more that you stood up there and chose yourself." They stood together in silence, the distant sounds of guests whispering and heels clicking on gravel behind them. Some from Zach's side had already slipped away, avoiding eye contact. Others remained seated, stunned, unsure how to react now that the script had been torn in half. Evelyn nodded toward the vineyard house. "You want to get out of here?" Ava looked once more toward the altar. Zach was still standing there exactly where she had left him, still holding the mic, still clutching the ring. His face, pale and slack, caught somewhere between confusion and the realization that this might go viral by Monday. He wasn't evil, just careless. A man who never understood how small his words had been until they echoed in a place where love was supposed to live. Ava turned back to Evelyn. "Yeah, let's go." Evelyn didn't offer an arm or lead the way. She simply walked beside her step for step, shoulder to shoulder. As they passed the catering tent, one of the young waiters, maybe 19, murmured respect under his breath. Ava gave him a nod. Not a thank you, just acknowledgement. By the time they reached the gravel drive near the front gate, her bridesmaids had started gathering their things. A few followed from a respectful distance, unsure whether to offer words or space. The ceremony had become something no one had planned for, but none of them would change a thing. But the day wasn't quite done, because sometimes the most meaningful conversations happen after the storm. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting a golden haze across the vines and stone walls. But the warmth in the air had shifted, replaced by tension release and quiet awe. Guests trickled out in small knots, whispering softly, clutching favors they no longer knew what to do with. Should they keep them, toss them? Would it be weird to eat cake at a wedding that never finished? Inside the house, the event staff packed up untouched hors d'oeuvres and uncorked champagne bottles. A woman from the venue leaned toward her colleague and whispered, "Should we still serve dinner?" The answer came with a silent shrug. Out on the wide stone porch of the vineyard estate, Ava Monroe, 34, sat barefoot on an old cedar bench. Her silver heels were offset neatly beside her. The soft train of her wedding dress was slightly wrinkled around her ankles, and the veil, so carefully placed hours earlier, now rested loosely in her lap like a relic from a version of her life that no longer fit. She stared quietly at the gravel drive, watching the last of the guests' cars disappear beyond the vineyard gates. Her face wasn't sad. It was clear, still centered, almost peaceful. Evelyn Monroe, 59. Her godmother and a retired Air Force major leaned casually against one of the porch columns nearby. she hadn't changed out of her uniform. Even surrounded by lanterns, roses, and remnants of wedding day glamour, she looked like she belonged more than anyone else. "Do you regret it?" Evelyn asked, eyes focused on the same fading horizon. Ava didn't turn her head. Not even a little. Evelyn gave a small nod. Good. Silence returned, filled only by the crunch of distant tires, the whisper of trees in the breeze, and the muffled clinking of glassware being cleared inside. "You know," Ava said softly after a long pause, "for the longest time, I thought if I didn't make this relationship work, I'd be proving all the wrong people right." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "What people? The ones who said I was too opinionated, too independent, too—" "Much," Ava said, exhaling slowly. "So I compromised. A little here, a little there. Nothing big, just made myself quieter, easier to love. Until one day I looked in the mirror and barely recognized who was looking back." Evelyn stepped away from the column and sat beside her. "Real love doesn't require shrinking," she said. "And it damn sure doesn't require racing to keep up." Ava let out a dry laugh. "Wish I'd figured that out before the altar." "You figured it out at the altar," Evelyn said with a smirk. "That's pretty damn fast if you ask me." Ava smiled, then looked over at her. "Were you always this wise? Takes a few decades, a couple deployments, and at least a dozen bad dates with worse men?" Evelyn grinned. "But yeah, I've picked up a few things." Just then, Lena, Ava's college roommate, appeared on the porch steps. She was holding 2 bottles of water and a canvas tote overflowing with backup flats, lip gloss bobby pins, and breath mints. "Got your essentials," Lena said with a soft smile. "Also, I think Zach's mom tried to slap the wedding planner." Ava raised an eyebrow. "Seriously missed." Wedding planner ducked. Honestly, it was the most athletic moment of the afternoon. Evelyn let out a hearty laugh, genuine and unrestrained. Lena handed Ava a water bottle. "You okay?" Ava nodded. "Yeah, I actually am." Lena leaned in for a hug. "I'm proud of you. Not because you walked away, but because you did it in front of everyone. That takes guts." "Thank you," Ava whispered, "for staying." "Always," Lena said, then slipped back inside. Evelyn tapped Ava's shoulder gently. "So, what's next?" "No idea," Ava said honestly. "Perfect," Evelyn replied. "That means the path is wide open." Ava looked at her thoughtful. "You think people are going to judge me for walking out?" Evelyn shrugged. "Some will, and those people, not your people." Ava nodded slowly. It all made sense now. The silence, the slow applause, even the ache in her chest. None of it had been wasted. It was all a wake-up call. And sometimes clarity shows up in the middle of a beautiful mess. She stood and smoothed her dress more out of habit than vanity. "You hungry?" she asked. Evelyn grinned, starving. They walked down the steps side by side, past the overturned chairs, the wilting centerpieces, and scattered petals that now looked more like confetti from a revolution than a celebration. The wedding might be ended in chaos, but Ava didn't feel broken. She felt free. But before this story ends, there's one last truth she hopes you'll hear, one that too many people learned too late. That night back at her townhouse on the edge of town, Ava sat cross-legged on the couch in her wrinkled wedding dress. Her makeup was smudged, her hair undone. But her eyes were clear. The house was quiet, no champagne, no playlist, just the hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional car passing outside. Her phone buzzed again. Messages lit up the screen. "You okay? That was wild, I never saw that coming. Proud of you. Are you really all right?" She read them all, but she didn't feel the need to reply not yet. In the guest room, Evelyn was already asleep. The door was cracked, slightly open. Her military-issue duffel bag sat by the wall name tag still attached. Ava had offered to wash her uniform in the morning. Evelyn had just smiled and said one step at a time. And that's exactly what Ava planned to take. One honest, steady step at a time on her own terms. Ava had offered to wash Evelyn's uniform, but she'd just waved it off with a smirk. "It's been through worse," she said. Later that night, when the house was quiet and the sky outside had turned to velvet, Ava finally opened the voice recorder app on her phone, not for Instagram, not for a podcast, just for herself. No filters, no edits. She tapped record and spoke softly into the silence. "You don't really notice when it starts happening," she said. "When you begin softening your edges just so someone else doesn't feel uncomfortable around your shine. It's little things at first. Changing how you talk, laughing at jokes that don't land, letting comments slide because you're tired of explaining yourself." Her voice stayed steady, but her chest rose and fell slowly. "And then one day she continued, you're standing at your own wedding, listening to a man tell a room full of people that your confidence is inconvenient, that your strength is somehow too much." She let that hang there. "I almost let it slide," she admitted. "I really did. I almost smiled and stayed quiet because I didn't want to ruin the moment. But moments get ruined whether you speak or not. The only question is who gets to tell the story." A pause. She glanced down at her hands. No ring, no bouquet, just her palms open, unshaking. "I don't regret walking away," she whispered. "I regret waiting that long to remember who I was." She pressed stop. The lesson was long, but it landed hard. Respect isn't a compliment someone tosses at you when they're feeling generous. It's a standard you uphold even when it makes other people uncomfortable. Love isn't meant to confuse you, or belittle you, or turn your fire into something they get to smother when it suits them. Ava didn't feel heroic. Not that night, not the morning after. But over time, she realized that bravery doesn't always look like speeches and battles. Sometimes it's just choosing peace over performance, and being okay with the silence that follows. A week later, she sent a single email to everyone who had attended. No dramatics, no monologue, just this: "Thank you to those who came with love in your hearts. The wedding will not be moving forward, but the future she's still wide open, and so am I." People whispered, of course. There were murmurs at business lunches, half-baked theories over mimosas. Some said she was impulsive, others said she was powerful. But their opinions never mattered. Not really. Because Ava Monroe had done what so many never find the courage to do. She chose herself. In public, in a wedding dress, holding nothing but her name. So if you've ever been in a room that made you feel smaller, just to keep someone else comfortable, take this as your reminder. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't need a disaster to justify your exit. You don't need permission to stand tall even if your voice trembles. And if someone you care about needs this reminder, send it to them. Because we all deserve to be seen fully without apology.